In just 8 years, California-based Anduril Industries has gone from a little-known startup named after a sword from the Lord of the Rings to maybe the planet's most well-known up-and-coming defense contractor. Since exploding onto the defense scene, Anduril has drawn contracts and headlines for a wide variety of cutting-edge technologies, while beating out industry giants like Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, and even Microsoft for the opportunity to build things like AI-enabled drone fighter jets for the Air Force, augmented reality headsets for the Army, and reusable turbojet-powered interceptors for the Navy. Heck, in the past 6 months alone, Anduril's received 6 contracts for a more diverse array of products than most firms would see in a lifetime, from solid rocket motors for Army artillery shells to a resilient mesh network for the Space Force's Space Domain Awareness Architecture, to counter-drone air defense systems for the Marine Corps and new drone autonomy software for the Special Operations Command. By the close of 2025, Anduril says they'll have been awarded some $6 billion in government contracts since their launch just 8 short years ago. At this pace, in the few days it takes for this script to go from a Google Doc to YouTube, they may have even secured another. But the sky is not enough for Anduril's design team, and soon they could bring about a similar seismic shift in the world's most challenging warfighting domain: the open ocean, with their school bus-sized drone submarine known as the Dive XL, and a new bevy of AI-enabled undersea drones and low-cost torpedoes that they've dubbed Copperhead. So let's talk about how the US Navy could use Anduril's new maritime drone platforms to solve some of the long-standing challenges that the US Navy is facing, and why the ocean is only getting scarier by the day. I'm Alex Hollings. Welcome to Sea Power. Anduril has been no stranger to this channel in the past. In recent months, we've discussed the game-changing Roadrunner M Interceptor, the new YFQ-44A fighter drone, and the Barracuda line of low-cost cruise missiles. All systems that promise to fundamentally change the way the American military goes about waging war in the sky. But Anduril isn't content to keep its warfighting endeavors above sea level. And to be clear, that makes a ton of sense. Roughly 71% of our pale blue dot of a planet is shrouded in open ocean, representing both the most contested and the least accessible theater of modern warfare. At any given point in time, there are literally tens of thousands of large-hulled vessels traversing the waterways of our world, and potentially hundreds of crewed submarines lurking beneath the surface. These murky depths are the hunting grounds for America's Los Angeles, Seawolf, and Virginia-class nuclear attack submarines, the apex predators of the sea, while the vast majority of America's deployed nuclear weapons are tucked away in the hulls of their sister ships, America's Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines. With 71 active subs, the US Navy boasts the largest subforce on the planet by a pretty healthy margin, but don't let that figure lull you into a false sense of security. America's economic exclusion zone, or the portions of the ocean where the United States maintains sovereign economic control, encompasses around 4.38 million square miles of open ocean. That's larger than the entire continental United States, and it's accessible via some 95,471 miles of shoreline. In simple terms, it's pretty much impossible to defend this entire area using traditional Navy ships and manpower, and Homeland Defense is just one of several tasks assigned to America's Blue Water Navy. And the challenge is not just about scope. Unlike high-profile Russian vaporware like the faux hypersonic Kinzhal missile, or the stealth fighter fanfiction that Moscow's dubbed the Su-75 Checkmate, independent analysis of the Russian submarine force suggests their investments into the undersea realm have paid real dividends, with a reported 64 in-service subs, and analysts from the Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, describing the new Yasin and Yasin M-class submarines as a, quote, substantial risk to Western forces thanks to their stealth and long-range strike capabilities. As their analysis pointed out, these advanced new subs also point toward a transition in Russian warfare doctrine, as dedicated attack subs give way to platforms that can also engage targets on land at long ranges using vertically launched cruise missiles like the conventionally armed Caliber and the allegedly hypersonic 3M22 Zircon, with claimed ranges of around 1,500 and 600 miles respectively. Now, during my trip to NORAD and US Northcom last year, concerns about these non-nuclear long-range missile strikes against vital US infrastructure were among the focal points of our discussions, which, at least for me, really underscored how potent these submarine-based threats really can be. I mean, it's tough not to take these sorts of things seriously when you're standing in front of a wall that has "the homeland is no longer a sanctuary" painted across it in very big letters. And this shift in Russian submarine philosophy comes alongside a significant uptick in Russian cruise missile-equipped attack submarines being detected along America's eastern seaboard in recent years, with Russian submarine captains even bragging about sailing to within striking distance of American naval bases on the East Coast on state television starting in 2018. I'll quote now retired U.S. Navy Vice Admiral Andrew Woody Lewis from a statement he made back in 2020. Our new reality is that when our sailors toss the lines over and set sail, they can expect to be operating in a contested space once they leave Norfolk. Our ships can no longer expect to operate in a safe haven on the East Coast or merely cross the Atlantic unhindered to operate in another location. We have seen an ever-increasing number of Russian submarines deployed in the Atlantic, and these submarines are more capable than ever, deploying for longer periods of time with more lethal weapon systems. And while China's submarine force has traditionally lagged behind their American and Russian counterparts, the Chinese People's Liberation Army Navy has been taking a page out of Uncle Sam's book to address that problem, and just pouring tons and tons of money into closing the technological gap. Today, China operates the world's third largest submarine fleet with roughly 60 known vessels in service, including 6 nuclear-armed ballistic missile subs and just 6 nuclear-powered attack submarines, but also dozens of diesel-electric and incredibly stealthy air-independent propulsion diesel subs. The majority of these submarines would be forced to operate within relative proximity to Chinese ports, but the makeup and capabilities of China's subforce are changing pretty quickly. China's newest Type 093 attack submarines are already armed with YJ-18 anti-ship cruise missiles in addition to their torpedo complement, but American intelligence assessments suggest a new iteration of the Type 093, currently in development, will lean into the land attack mission set in the same way Russian attack subs have, with provisions to launch CJ-10 conventionally armed land attack cruise missiles at targets more than 1,200 miles inland. The even newer Type 095, along with the SLBM packing Type 096, promise to represent an even more potent threat when they do eventually reach service. So to put it simply, the world's oceans are growing more dangerous by the day, and it couldn't come at a worse time for the US Navy. As we outlined in a recent video about America's ailing shipbuilding industry, warship deliveries of all sorts are an average of 1 to 3 years behind schedule across the board, and submarines are among the worst culprits. In 27 years of Virginia-class sub construction, the US has never once met its target of building 2 new subs per year. And since 2022, the entire US has managed to build an average of just 1.2 submarines per year, despite that goal increasing from 2 to 3 before the close of this decade. Even amid economic sanctions, Russia was able to field 4 new submarines in 2024. And if things continue at their current rate, China's notably less advanced submarine fleet will still outnumber America's by 2035. Now, these numbers are daunting, but they're also exactly the sort of challenge that Anduril has built a multi-billion-dollar empire overcoming. And now they're aiming to take their low-cost, high-volume AI-enabled approach into the deep sea with their Dive XL submarines and a new line of Copperhead torpedoes. Now, the vast majority of Anduril's offerings, regardless of their intended environment, are built upon a shared digital foundation that the company calls Lattice. Now, this open software platform uses artificial intelligence to gather data supplied from a wide range of sensors before fusing it all into a singular God's eye view of the battlefield, all while enabling coordination and cooperation between autonomous assets in the theater. And because this AI-enabled software is sensor and platform agnostic, it can be quickly integrated into existing battlefield assets like shipboard radars, other drones, and more, allowing Anduril's drones and weapon systems to complement already deployed capabilities rather than needing to outright replace them. But I might argue that what makes Anduril so successful in the defense space isn't just their ability to integrate their platforms into existing defense infrastructure, or even the advanced autonomy provided by Lattice and Anduril's edge computing platforms. No, the real magic behind Anduril is their devotion to simplified, scalable production. Or to put that another way, Anduril doesn't just build advanced AI-enabled weapon systems, it builds a lot of them really quickly for a much lower cost than conventionally crewed platforms and even many uncrewed competitors. Or at least that is their sales pitch. And there's really nowhere where that could have a bigger or more valuable impact on America's defense apparatus than where it's ailing most: its ability to field enough combat assets to fight and win in the 139 million square miles of open ocean that dominates the Earth's surface. In recent years, Anduril has unveiled several lines of underwater drones that collectively represent a wide range of reconnaissance and combat capabilities. The largest is a line of long-range submersibles that Anduril's dubbed the Dive XL. And the newest, revealed just this last month, are the Copperhead line of undersea drones and low-cost torpedoes. These systems can all be used on their own, but as I learned in my conversations with the folks at Anduril, they could be even more potent if used together. The Dive XL began its path to service under the banner of the Boston-based Dive Technologies, who touted their 6,000-pound Dive LD prototype as a long-duration deep ocean surveillance platform. Now, shortly after producing their first prototype in 2021, Anduril stepped in and bought the firm, onboarding its 30 engineers with the stated goal of, quote, scaling up their technology. Before long, the Dive LD, which still exists as an Anduril product, had bulked up into what we now call the Dive XL. In 2022, it was reported that the Dive XL can reach absolutely insane depths, approaching 20,000 feet. Now that's deep enough to reach the Titanic and then dive another 7,000 feet, far further into the inky abyss than just about any warfighting sub in service today or in history. Other media reports claim the platform has an unrefueled range of at least 1,000 nautical miles, or more than 1,150 miles for those of us who aren't pirates, and it can remain at sea for months at a time. Now, Australia's Admiral Peter Quinn claimed that the platform's range, stealth, and persistence will allow the Australian Navy to operate these subs all throughout the Indo-Pacific, again, suggesting a pretty extensive range to coincide with its large payload capabilities. Now, the sub's all-electric powertrain allows it to operate fully submerged for longer periods of time than similar hybrid diesel-electric submarines that need to snorkel in air for that diesel combustion. Anduril would not confirm any of these specific figures for me, but they did highlight that it's a modular platform designed with a nose and tail section that can be married up to what they call payload modules. In its largest configuration, which Anduril describes as roughly the size of a subway car, the platform can carry 3 of the same or 3 different payload modules. In its smaller configuration, Anduril says the Dive XL is roughly the size of a school bus and carries a single larger compartment that's roughly the size of 2 standard payload modules. In testing, Anduril has already demonstrated the ability to rapidly swap out payload modules to reconfigure these subs in the field. And this makes the Dive XL large enough to carry a wide variety of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance payloads, not to mention a broad array of weapon systems, while still being small enough to be transported anywhere in the world in the back of a C-17 or inside a standard 40-foot shipping container. It can then be deployed from any number of existing surface vessels or piers. As Anduril puts it, low logistics is a key trait of this platform. And these aren't hypothetical assets. Back in December of 2022, Anduril delivered its first Dive XL drone submarine to the Australian Navy, which they've dubbed the Ghost Shark. And Anduril not only delivered this platform on budget, but a full year early, taking just 7 months to go from contract to delivery. And since then, these submarines have been at sea just about every day off of both the Australian and American coasts, even setting a record for longest underway ever completed by a vehicle of this class when it remained at sea for 100 continuous hours last year, a feat that Anduril says doesn't even come close to the sub's full potential. In 2023, the U.S. Defense Department started taking Anduril subs a lot more seriously after the Navy's Defense Innovation Unit pitted several large unmanned underwater vehicles against one another in an open water obstacle course that was meant to assess their ability to conduct distributed, long-range, persistent underwater sensing and payload delivery in what they called contested environments. Now, details about this competition remain awfully sparse, but we do know that Anduril's smaller Dive LD took home the win and a new contract with the Defense Innovation Unit to continue testing with the platform, though the details of that contract remain undisclosed. By June, Anduril announced construction on a factory in Rhode Island capable of producing 50 Dive LD robo-subs per year, or as many as 200 if the Navy decides they need a production surge. But whether or not there's actually been an order placed for these subs is not quite clear yet. By 2024, Anduril's Senior Vice President for Engineering, Dr. Shane Arnott, told the War Zone that the company was actively integrating more than a dozen new commercial and military payloads into that larger Dive XL submersible, pointing toward a pretty rapidly expanding future for this submarine drone not long after the Navy took a significant interest in its smaller sister. Now, thanks to Anduril's Lattice AI, both of these subs can not only operate autonomously, but they can even coordinate with other Dive XLs or similar ocean-going drones for swarm functionality. And that's where my conversation with Anduril took a turn that I didn't quite expect. Because anyone who spent any amount of time near a submarine knows all too well that radio waves don't penetrate seawater effectively enough to maintain communications deep beneath the surface of the ocean. The Navy submarines overcome this limitation to at least some extent, using vast fields of antennas pre-positioned in a handful of locations around the world to broadcast simplistic messages on very low frequencies, giving subcommanders the deep-sea equivalent of a text message when necessary. Anduril's above-surface drones, like anything from aircraft to tanks today, can use a wide variety of radio or line-of-sight communications, but under the water, none of these methods would be as effective for swarm coordination. So instead, Anduril's submersibles operate like a combination of whales and your old 56K modem, using acoustic communication to coordinate with one another below the surf. When higher bandwidth communications are necessary, the Dive XL can surface and use its integrated antennas, but once it dives back below the waves, it can relay new mission details to nearby assets using audible pings. And that ability to communicate and coordinate with other submerged assets brings me to one of the Dive XL's most important intended mission sets: to serve as what Anduril calls a mothership for other drones and undersea weapons, like Anduril's new Copperhead line. Like the Barracuda line of AAVs or autonomous aerial vehicles Anduril builds, the Copperhead line of AUVs or autonomous underwater vehicles can be equipped with a wide range of ISR or electronic warfare payloads, or can be fitted with an explosive warhead to serve as an inexpensive torpedo they call the Copperhead M. Now, the smaller of these AI-enabled torpedoes, called the Copperhead 100, is about 106 inches long, just shy of 9 feet, and has just a 12.75-inch diameter. Anduril says it can be equipped with active or passive sensors, acoustic comm relays to extend the reach of underwater communications, side-scan sonar or chemical detection hardware for identifying naval mines, or in the M variant, a 100-pound high-explosive warhead, providing what Anduril describes as roughly the equivalent power to a Mark 54 lightweight anti-submarine torpedo. With a top speed of a pretty impressive 30 knots, around 35 miles per hour, the Copperhead 100 can keep pace with most modern warships, including Chinese destroyers. But if you need some real firepower, then you could turn to the Copperhead 500, which can carry more of whatever sensors or communications equipment you might need in its much larger 163-inch hull with a 21-inch diameter. Or it can carry a 500-pound heavyweight class warhead, and that makes the Copperhead 500M's warhead only a little bit smaller than that of a Virginia-class attack sub's Mark 48 heavy torpedoes. Now, Anduril touts these torpedoes as inexpensive and easy to produce, which is a through line for all of their products, and says they are the world's first torpedoes designed specifically to be launched from AUVs like the Dive LD and Dive XL. In fact, when I spoke to Anduril, they told me these Copperheads could be deployed by the Dive XL in pretty serious numbers. A single Dive XL can carry what they called dozens of Copperhead 100s or multiple 500s, though they wouldn't specify exactly how many. With various loadouts in these AUVs, they can enable a wide range of operations, but one example Anduril gave me was sending out sensor and EW-equipped Copperhead 100s to scout out and confuse enemy ships, followed by launching 100Ms to engage smaller vessels and heavier Copperhead 500Ms to bring larger warships down. According to Anduril, they could rapidly produce thousands of these torpedoes at what they say is a fraction of the cost of legacy Mark 48 and 54 torpedoes. Now, when I spoke to Anduril and Lockheed Martin about their new lines of low-cost cruise missiles a few months back, both firms made it clear to me that they don't see one another as direct competition, really because of the nature of near-peer conflict would mean needing multiple suppliers producing weapons with similar capability sets. Or, to put that another way, if the US were to go to war with China, there would be plenty of targets for everyone. And when it comes to the Copperhead line, Anduril seems to be taking a similar approach, not marketing their 100 and 500Ms as replacements for the Mark 48 and 54 torpedoes, but rather as another complementary capability. This ability to build both these submarines and their weapon systems on short timelines and in high volumes could be a boon for the Navy, who's actively developing a long line of uncrewed surface and subsurface drones for exactly these reasons. The scary truth of the matter is the world seems to be turning away from the relative stability of the past 80 or so years and toward not just a new era of great power competition, but a new struggle against what's really 21st century imperialism. with Russia grinding troops into Ukraine's mud with aims of conquering its neighbor, and China building up its military to do the same to Taiwan. These aren't conflicts between peer-level states that have seen relations degrade into war, but rather powerful autocracies attacking those they perceive as weak, simply because they believe they can. These nations aren't going to surrender their strategic objectives or the wealth of conquest lightly. And that makes fielding a deterrent military force maybe as important now as in any time in American history. And in the 21st century, deterrence is increasingly not just a question of technology, it's a question of volume. And that might just be why Anduril is making such a big splash in the world of submarines and, more broadly speaking, the defense industry as a whole lately. But it's easy to get excited about the capabilities of a handful of prototypes and the big promises of their manufacturer. It'll be in the years ahead that we ultimately find out if Anduril has what it takes to join the ranks of the legendary industry primes like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon, or if they fizzle out like so many disruptive startups have before. But if you ask me, I probably wouldn't bet against this quickly growing startup, because there are indeed plenty of targets to go around, and Anduril seems to have its sights set on a whole lot of them. And with that ends yet another edition of Sea Power from Sandboxx News. I'm Alex Hollings. Make sure to swing by sandboxnews.com today and every day for all the latest in news, entertainment, and now merch from all around the force. If you got anything out of today's video, make sure to click like and subscribe down below and leave me a comment so I know what I should cover next. And of course, don't forget to tap on that bell icon so you never miss a drop from Sandboxx News.